Have you ever stopped to think about what keeps your brain firing on all cylinders 24/7? It's this absolutely incredible circulatory system, a true masterpiece of natural engineering. So come on, let's take a tour of your brain's brilliant plumbing. So, to get us started, I've got a question for you. What do you think happens if one of the main fuel lines to your brain gets a clog? Does everything just shut down? Well, you might be surprised. Turns out, your brain has a really clever backup plan, and we're about to see exactly how it works. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is that it's not just one single pipe feeding your brain. It's actually got two main systems, kind of like two massive superhighways that are constantly delivering all the oxygen and nutrients it needs to work. Think of them as two completely separate routes into the same city. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This job isn't split 50-50, not even close. One of those systems, the anterior circulation, is doing the heavy lifting, handling a whopping 80% of the blood flow. The other one, the posterior circulation, just takes care of the other 20%. And that huge difference tells you something really important. That anterior system is fueling the biggest, most energy-hungry parts of your brain, the parts responsible for your personality, your thoughts, all your actions. Let's take a closer look at that big one first. So, this is the anterior highway. You can think of it as the dominant pipeline, the main feed that powers all your higher-level thinking. It's really the system that makes you, well, you. This whole system gets its start from the internal carotid arteries. Picture two major pipelines running right up the front of your neck, and from there, they branch out to feed almost your entire brain. And what exactly is it feeding? Oh, just the heavy hitters. You know, your frontal lobes, that's your thinking and personality. Your parietal lobes for all your senses. Your temporal lobes for memory and hearing. And it even supplies parts of your visual system, like your retina. It's a huge job. Okay, so what about that other 20%? It might sound small, but don't let that fool you. This posterior highway is responsible for some of the most basic, life-sustaining functions you've got. This is the part of the system that just keeps you alive. We can trace this second system all the way back to the vertebral arteries, which, as the name suggests, run up through your spine at the back of your neck. They actually merge together into one single main artery called the basilar artery, which is like the main trunk line for the back of the brain. So what's this system in charge of? The absolute core functions. We're talking about the brainstem, which controls your breathing and your heartbeat without you ever having to think about it. It powers the cerebellum for balance and coordination, and the occipital lobe, which is the main processing center for everything you see. Yeah, pretty critical stuff. Okay, so we've got these two separate systems, right? The 80% anterior one and the 20% posterior one. But how do they connect? This is where we get to the coolest, most fascinating part of this whole setup, a central hub called the Circle of Willis. I absolutely love this analogy. It is the perfect way to picture what's happening. If one of the main highways into the brain has a total traffic jam, a blockage, this traffic circle lets the blood reroute itself, find a detour, and still get to where it needs to go. It is a brilliant, brilliant safety feature. Now, the fancy medical term for this kind of connection is an anastomosis, but all that really means is a natural link between two pipelines, like a bridge connecting two highways that were totally separate before. And believe me, the Circle of Willis is one of the most important anastomoses in your entire body. And here it is. This shows the whole thing perfectly. You can literally see the complete loop, how that anterior system and the posterior system are all linked together in this one circular junction. This is that built-in backup generator we were talking about at the beginning, just an elegant solution to a potentially fatal problem. But what happens when the system gets overwhelmed? What if a blockage is just too big, or that circle can't quite compensate? Well, that's when a stroke happens. And where that blockage occurs determines everything about the symptoms. And this is so crucial to understand. A stroke in that anterior system looks completely different from a stroke in the posterior system. A block in that big 80% highway might cause things like weakness on one side of the body or speech problems. But a posterior stroke, that's more likely to affect balance, swallowing, or vision. Let's quickly break down some of the language doctors use to describe all this. Okay, so when the anterior system gets hit, communication can go haywire. First, you can have a mechanical problem. If the muscles used to talk become weak, it can cause slurred or really unclear speech. The term for this is dysarthria. It's a muscle issue. But what if the muscles are working just fine, but the person just can't find the right words? Or maybe they can't understand what you're saying to them. See, that's not a muscle problem. That's an issue with the brain's language centers themselves. And that is called aphasia. Now let's flip over to the posterior system. Remember how we said it supplies the cerebellum, our little balance center? Well, if that gets blocked, you can see a sudden loss of coordination. The movements become clumsy, unsteady. That condition is known as ataxia. That posterior system also powers the brainstem, which handles all those automatic things we take for granted. If it's damaged, something as basic as swallowing can become incredibly difficult or even impossible. The medical term for that is dysphagia. And finally, because that posterior circulation feeds the main vision processing center in the brain, a stroke back there can cause some serious visual problems. One of the most common is seeing double, a condition simply called diplopia. So, when you step back and look at it, this whole system is just an incredible piece of engineering. The circle of Willis is this brilliant backup designed to protect your brain from a single point of failure. But it is so important to remember that it's not always enough. It's not invincible. This complex, elegant system is working hard to protect you every single second of every single day. So the real question, the one to leave you with, is this: what are you doing to protect it?